Welcome to part 2 of How to Play 7TV Fantasy. We rejoin the action at the start of the heroic cast's second turn. At the start of their turn, they draw the Undercranking Trilogy card, providing a free move action for friendly extras this turn. The heroic cast generates 6 plot points, added to their pool of 1. The heroic cast wishes to remove the poison status from the knight. However, poisoned requires 2 plot points to remove instead of 1. The heroic cast pays the cost, but elect to keep the distracted status. The knight moves once, charging through the river to meet the goblin champion in mounted combat. They move 3.5 inches due to the effects of the water, and fall short of reaching the goblin champion. Next, the heroic cast activates the Grand Magus. They would like to have the model make a ranged strike against the vile necromancer. Unfortunately, a model cannot make ranged strikes while an opposing model is in base contact. The model can, however, make a fight or presence attack. The Grand Magus selects their Beetling Browse Presence Strike once again, and targets the vile necromancer. The necromancer rolls a 3, totaling 13, and the Grand Magus rolls a 6, totaling 15. The strike succeeds again, and the vile necromancer gains the distracted status once more.
When a model receives 2 of the same status, they suffer -1 health, and the status continues. Because the vile necromancer has now been distracted twice, it loses 1 health. We place a wound token next to the model.
The Grand Magus spends its second action declaring a fight attack against the Goblin Warrior in base contact, selecting the Ironwood Staff. The Goblin Warrior rolls a 4, adding its defense statistic of 7, equaling 11. The Grand Magus rolls a 3, adding 8, which also equals 11. Remember, a strike roll must equal or exceed the defense roll to be successful. The Grand Magus roundly beats the Goblin Warrior, applying the weapon effect of -1 health and knocked down. The Goblin Warrior's last line of defense is its Buckler special effect, allowing it to survive the damage on a roll of a 6. It rolls a 2 and thus loses 1 health. Having only 1 health to begin with, it is removed from play. Having managed to move 12 inches in the opposing player's previous turns, the Weather Ranger may now move into base contact with the vile necromancer with its first movement action. This charge incurs a free strike against the vile necromancer. The Ranger selects his longsword for the attack. The villainous cast would like to ensure their star remains in play, and so attempts to spend a plot point to add an extra die to the roll. However, because the vile necromancer is still suffering from the distracted status, it counts as disadvantaged, and so cannot add any extra dice to its defense. It can only use 1d6, rolling a 1, ouch, totaling a defense roll of 11. A model suffering from a status also suffers -1 to its strike and defense rolls, so the final defense roll is further reduced by 1 to give a final total of just 10. The Weathered Ranger rolls a 4, adding its strike value of 8, totaling 12. The strike is successful, and the vile necromancer suffers -1 health. We place another wound token next to the model.
A model may not make 2 fight actions in an activation. However, because the previous strike was a free action arising from a charge, the Weathered Ranger may spend its second action attacking the vile necromancer with its long sword. This time, the strike fails, and the skeletal star clings to life, or undeath.
With that, the Weathered Ranger's activation ends. Next, the Halflings are activated and clash with the Goblins. One Goblin Warrior gains the distracted status, but is otherwise unharmed. The heroic cast then activates the Elf Scouts. The Elf moves with its first action, then shoots its Elven Shortbow at the Goblin Sneak Up High in the hills with its second action. The strike is just in range, however, the Goblin Sneak has the Hide special effect. Because it is hidden away on the hilltop, the Goblin Sneak gains the benefit of hard cover. The Hide special effect means that any model with such cover must be within half a strike's range, otherwise the strike automatically fails. The Goblin Sneak is further than half the shortbow's range of 6 inches, and therefore the strike fails. With no more plot points left to spare, the heroic cast ends their action phase, and ultimately their turn.
The villains draw the Inferior Sequel Trilogy card. Without a co-star in play, the villainous cast immediately gains an additional plot point. They garner a total of 8 plot points for their pool. First, The villainous cast activates each of the surviving goblin warriors for a plot point each. A model may only make strikes within its front zone, the area 180 degrees in the direction it is facing. In order to engage the halflings, the goblin warriors must first spend a movement action to change their facing. They then spend their second actions attacking the halflings with their short swords.
The goblin warrior, still suffering from the distracted status, rolls a 6, but is forced to re-roll it due to the status, and subsequently rolls a 1. The halfling defends well, and the strike fails. The second halfling rolls a 2, for a defense of 9. Its Fug of Pipeweed special effect allows the re-roll of a single defense die per turn. The halfling does so, and rolls a 3 for a defense of 10. The attacking goblin warrior scores a strike value of 10 also, and, despite the pipeweed, successfully strikes the halfling.
However, the halfling has the endearing special effect, forcing the goblin warrior to pass a spirit statistic test. It rolls a 3 and fails, and the halfling is given the captured status instead of being removed from play. The captured token is placed next to the model.
Captured models immediately move into base contact with their captor and do not generate plot points for their cast.
The benefit of capturing a model instead of removing it from play is that when the captor activates, it gains the plot point generation for the captured model. 2 for a star, 1 for a co-star, half rounded up for an extra. A happy accident for this goblin warrior. In retaliation for the previous assault, the goblin sneak spends its first action aiming and its second action to declare a ranged strike against the elf scout.
Aiming is a special action that gives the model's next ranged strike +1 to its strike value.
The elf scout rolls a 4, adding its defense of 7 for a total of 11. The goblin sneak rolls a 4 as well, adding 1 for aiming and adding 6 for its strike value, also totaling 11. The tie means success for the goblin sneak, and the elf scout is outshot, suffering -1 health and is removed from play. Clinging to one life, the vile necromancer attempts to summon arcane forces and perform a spell.
Each profile card with the Magic User special effect will have a list of grimoires from which it can choose spells before the game. The number next to the Magic User special effect is how many spells a model may learn, and also how many d6 are added to that profile's magic pool at the start of each activation. The Vile Necromancer has Magic User 3, and so knows 3 spells and gains 3d6 for its magic pool.
Only attempting one spell, the Vile Necromancer chooses to perform the Soul Drain spell from the Scrolls of the Dead grimoire. Each spell has a difficulty number that the caster must beat, using dice from their magic pool plus either their mind or spirit statistic.
When performing a spell, dice are not counted as they usually are in 7TV. That is, by taking the highest die roll and adding 1 point to that roll for every 4+ rolled on any extra dice. Instead, the die scores from the magic pool roll are added together traditionally, totaling the sum of each number shown on the dice. The Vile Necromancer uses all 3d6 from its magic pool. It rolls a 6, a 4 and a 2, for a total of 12. Soul Drain uses the spirit statistic, so that value, 4 for the Vile Necromancer, is also added, totaling 16. The difficulty required to perform Soul Drain is 11, therefore the spell is successful.
The Vile Necromancer chooses the Grand Magus as the target of the spell, and the heroic star loses 1 health. With its second and final action, the Vile Necromancer attacks the Weathered Ranger in base contact, choosing its Night Shard strike.
The Ranger's defense roll of 3 + 9 is beaten by the Necromancer's strike roll of 5 + 8.
The Ranger loses 1 health and gains the poison status. The Goblin Shaman activates next, moving 6 inches first, then using the Bad Trip special effect once again. It passes the spirit test with a 5 and pays the necessary plot point cost. It chooses to use the second option for the special effect, selecting a model within 6 inches to relocate within 12 inches.
The Goblin Shaman chooses the nearest Goblin Sneak, who is teleported into base contact with the Grand Magus.
The Sneak then activates and uses its 1 fight action to attempt to strike at the Grand Magus, but fails the spirit test as required by the Magus's fearsome special effect. Now the Goblin Sneak must count its strike value as half. The Grand Magus rolls a 5, totaling a defense of 15, requiring the Goblin Sneak to roll at least a 13. It decides to call it a day instead. The Goblin Champion activates, claims the objective token with its first action, and moves into base contact with the Knight, gaining a free charge attack. The Knight rolls a 3, adds 2 for being mounted, and adds their defense of 8, totaling 13. The Knight, however, is suffering from the distracted status.
Distracted forces the model to re-roll the highest die after every roll. The Knight rolls another 3. All statuses also make the bearer suffer -1 to all strike and defense rolls. Therefore, the final total for the Knight's defense roll is 12.
The Goblin Champion uses its cleaver and gains an extra die free due to the deadly weapon effect. It rolls a 5 and a 4. As extra dice that score over 4 add 1 to strike and defense rolls, the total is 6. It adds the cleaver's strike value of 8, equaling 14, a success. The Knight then uses its special effect, Plate and Shield, rolling a 5 to ignore the effects of the strike. This concludes the Villainous cast's turn.
The Heroic cast begins their turn by drawing the Side Quest Trilogy card. This grants additional movement to a friendly model within close proximity to an objective token. The Heroic cast selects the Knight. The Heroic cast generates a total of 5 plot points, ignoring the halfling this is captured for the purpose of plot point generation as per the captured rules. The Knight activates and can rotate up to 180 degrees as a free move action, as indicated by the mount rules. It rotates 90 degrees, then moves out of base contact with the Goblin Champion. It moves 4 inches toward the objective token, making base contact with it at last.
Moving out of base contact, however, offers an opponent an opportunity in the form of a free strike. The Knight must roll a disadvantaged defense roll. A disadvantaged model cannot add extra dice to their strike or defense value.
The Knight rolls 1d6, adding its defense statistic and +2 for being mounted, and subtracting 1 for the distracted status, totaling a defense value of 13. Seeing a reasonably high defense, the Goblin Champion elects to spend 1 plot point to add an extra die to the roll. With Deadly, the Goblin Champion now rolls 3d6, resulting in a 6, a 2 and a 3. This totals 6, which is added to the cleaver's strike value of 8, totaling 14 and exceeding the defense roll. The strike is successful and the Knight suffers -1 health. It fails its Plate and Shield special effect with a 2. Therefore, we place a wound token next to the model. Across town, the Dwarf Fighter aims with its first action, then shoots its crossbow with its second. It chooses the Goblin Warrior with the captive Halfling as its target, risking injuring the Halfling by using a risky shot.
In a risky shot, the shooting model counts as disadvantaged for this strike, meaning it cannot add extra dice. If the strike misses, players must randomly select one model from either cast within fight range of the original target. This model is then the target of a successful strike by the original shooter.
Luckily, aiming provides +1 to the initial roll. The Goblin Warrior generates a defense roll of 10. The Dwarf Fighter rolls a 4, adding 1 for aiming and adding its strike value of 7, totaling 12. The Goblin then rolls a 4 for its Buckler special effect, failing and is removed from play. Despite the risk, the doughty dwarf freed the Halfling. We remove the captured status and token from the Halfling. The Grand Magus activates next and performs Blinding Light from the Tome of Shades and Shadow. It elects to roll 2 of the 3d6 from its magic pool, rolling a 6 and 3, totaling 9. Adding the Grand Magus's Mind statistic gives a total of 14, which succeeds. The Goblin Sneak in base contact is pushed 2 inches away and turned around, freeing the Magus.
The Grand Magus then attempts to perform a second spell. A model may attempt more than one spell per turn, but cannot perform the same spell twice. The Grand Magus attempts to perform Mirror Mirror on the Vile Necromancer and Weathered Ranger. However, it only has 1d6 left in its magic pool. It rolls a 1 and adds its Mind statistic, totaling 6. Mirror Mirror has a difficulty rating of 11. The Grand Magus fails to perform the spell. When a natural 1 is rolled when attempting to perform a spell, even if the attempt is successful, the magic user must roll 1d6 and consult the backlash table in the Director's Guide. The the Grand Magus rolls a 5 and gains the weakened status. We place the weakened token next to the model.
This halfling attempts with renewed vigour to remove the final goblin warrior from play. It uses its cherubic smile presence attack to successfully give the goblin warrior the distracted status. The second halfling activates and charges into the goblin warrior. This time its dagger strikes true and the goblin warrior is removed from play. With 2 plot points remaining, the heroic cast uses 1 to remove the weakened status from the Grand Magus. The heroic cast does not need to roll for axing because they have not had more than half their models removed from play. Similarly, there are no models on fire. The heroes do, however, choose to steal the scene.
Each player can choose to steal the scene once per game. Players stealing the scene immediately take another turn, but only generate half of their usual plot points, rounding up.
We are now in the second act of the game, meaning the game is well and truly underway. The heroic cast draws Wilhelm Scream. The knight, who is still distracted, and the weathered ranger, who is poisoned, are both knocked down.
The heroic cast only generates 3 plot points instead of 6, which are added to their pool of 1.
The dwarf fighter moves once, then shoots their crossbow at the goblin king. The crossbow has the readied weapon effect, meaning no added die may be used if the model has previously moved this activation. Unfazed by the odds, the dwarf shoots, exceeding the goblin king's defense roll and applying -1 health to the goblin king. The Grand Magus calls for aid using their unexpected ally special effect. A giant eagle appears on the heroic cast starting edge. The Grand Magus then moves into base contact with the Vile Necromancer, netting a free charge attack. The charge attack fails, but the second strike action succeeds as the Vile Necromancer is still distracted, suffering -1 to their defense roll. The Grand Magus delivers the final stroke with their ironwood staff, dispelling the Vile Necromancer.
Or so they think. The Vile Necromancer has the Death's Door special effect. For all intents and purposes, it remains in play at 0 health until the end of the next turn. Spooky.
Despite the Necromancer remaining in play, the heroic cast did reduce it to 0 health, and thus gain a bonus in plot points equivalent to the starting health of the star. We add those 3 plot points now. At the turning of the tide, the giant eagle activates and moves twice downstream. Because the profile has the fly special effect, it ignores the rules for moving through water and over scenery. Finally, both halflings activate and move toward the Goblin King, eager to intercept. With 3 plot points remaining, the heroic cast chooses to end their turn.
The villainous cast draws the Fight Rehearsal Trilogy card, allowing a strike sequence reroll later in the turn. Suffering multiple losses, the villainous cast garners a measly total of 5 plot points.
Remember, the Vile Necromancer counts as being in play until the end of this turn, so it still generates plot points for the villainous cast.
The Goblin King activates first, moves with its first action, then uses a presence attack for the second. The villainous cast chooses Warcry and targets the nearest halfling. The halfling rolls a defense of 8 and the Goblin King rolls a total of 13. The strike is successful and the targeted halfling gains the distracted status. Next, the Goblin Shaman moves with its first action into base contact with the Grand Magus, garnering a free charge strike. The villainous cast selects another presence attack, Hex. First, the Shaman must pass a Spirit Statistic test due to the Grand Magus's fearsome special effect. The Shaman rolls a 4, narrowly passing. The Magus rolls a 2, adding their defense for a total of 12. The Shaman rolls a 5, adding 7, totaling 12 also. The strike succeeds, and the immobilized status is applied to the Grand Magus. With its second action, the Goblin Shaman spends another plot point to use Hand of Gob. It passes the Spirit test and teleports the Goblin Sneak next to Objective Token 3.
Capitalising on the opportunity, the Goblin Sneak activates and collects the objective right from under the knight's nose. Its second action is to attempt to strike at the knight with its dagger, but the strike fails.
In its final moments on this plane, the vile necromancer attempts to strike at the Grand Magus with its Night Shard. It rolls a 5 on the Spirit Statistic test and passes. The Grand Magus then rolls a 14 for its defense roll, and the vile necromancer a 13 for its strike, both suffering a -1 penalty for their respective statuses. The strike fails. The vile necromancer's last act is to perform Soul Drain once more. It rolls all 3d6 in its magic pool, scoring 2 5s and a 4, a total of 14. A success. The poor, beaten, weathered ranger loses its last point of health. Because this would remove the model from play, the weathered ranger instead gains the dominated status and activates for free.
Dominated models count as being in play for the side that dominated them. The dominated weathered ranger then strikes at its former ally, the Grand Magus, with its longsword. The strike is successful, dropping the Grand Magus to 1 health. This ends the Villainous Cast action phase. Until the end of this turn, the Vile Necromancer and Weathered Ranger count as in play, so the Villainous Cast is still not considered axed. The Villainous Cast, however, will steal the scene. At the end of the turn, the Vile Necromancer and Weathered Ranger are finally removed from play. Because the Weathered Ranger has been removed from play, the Villainous Cast immediately gains 2 plot points.
As before, the Villainous Cast only generates half the usual plot points, totaling a pool of 5.
The Villainous Cast draw the Histrionic Hand-Waving Trilogy card. With their sole magic user removed from play, the Villainous Cast will not benefit from this Trilogy card.
The Goblin King activates, moves closer to Objective 4, and once again uses Warcry on the distracted Halfling. The Halfling rolls a 4 and is forced to re-roll down to a 2 due to the distracted status. Subtracting 1 and adding the Halfling's defense statistic totals 8. The Goblin King easily exceeds this with an 11, and the Halfling, having gained 2 tokens of the same status, suffers -1 health and is removed from play. With that, the Villainous Cast decides to end their action phase. At the end of turn 5, the Villainous Cast still has 6 models in play, having lost 4. They are therefore not considered axed, as more than half remain. With 4 plot points remaining, play swaps to the Heroic Cast, who are now on screen.
The Heroic Cast draws the Dungeon Restock Trilogy card, and places the Elf Scout back in the action, next to the Grand Magus. The heroes total 7 plot points in their pool. The Heroic Cast moves into the action phase. Stout of heart, the Dwarf Fighter attempts to halt the Goblin King in its tracks. The Dwarf first aims using a special action, then shoots their crossbow. The Goblin King rolls a defense of 12. The Dwarf, adding 1 for aiming, totals 14, a successful strike. The Goblin King suffers -1 health and is removed from play.
But the Villainous forces have one last trick up their moth-eaten sleeves. The Artifact special effect allows the cast to gain an additional artifact at the start of the game, and the Goblin King is able to use it. The Villainous cast reveals the Mirrored Shield and spends 2 plot points to activate it. The dwarf's bushy brows raise quickly in alarm as the crossbow bolt is reflected straight back, piercing the bearded one's light armour. The dwarf fighter is slain and removed from play.
Enraged by the humiliation of having the objective seized, the knight attacks the Goblin Sneak, whose crafty ways are no match for the nobleman's righteous fury. The broadsword strike is successful, and the Goblin Sneak is removed from play. The giant eagle swoops into base contact with the mounted Goblin champion, and attacks the wolf with its talons. Remember, a model may declare a strike against the mount or its rider.
The wolf rolls a 2, and its defense of 8 totals 10. The giant eagle rolls a 6, adds its strike value of 7, and inflicts the stun status on the wolf. When a model is stunned, we place the token next to the model and lay the model down.
A mounted rider whose mount is knocked down is automatically dismounted and must pass a body statistic test. The Goblin champion fails and is knocked down. The eagle strikes again with its talons. The wolf suffers -1 health as it gains the stun status for a second time. It is removed from play. The Elf Scout attempts to save his beleaguered ally and charges into the Goblin Shaman. The first free charge attack succeeds, with the elf spending a plot point to add an extra die. The second strike action, allowed because the first was a free action, fails to connect, even with another added die, and the shaman lives another day. With only one plot point remaining, the heroic cast cannot remove the statuses from the Grand Magus. Immobilized first requires poison to be removed, and removing poison costs 2 plot points. The heroic cast ends their turn. Less than half of their models have been removed, and no one is on fire.
The villainous cast draws hitting the mark, granting a much needed plot point if they are able to make a successful shoot or presence attack this turn. With only 4 extras left in play, the villainous cast generates only 2 plot points. They add these to their 4 plot points left from the previous turn.
Time is of the essence. Sensing immediate defeat, the Goblin King stomps over to the final objective and claims it for his Dark Master.
The Goblin Shaman activates and hexes the Grand Magus once more. Suffering from both immobilized and poisoned, the Grand Magus is defenseless, using only his base defense of 10, dropped to 8. The Shaman adds an extra die to ensure success. A 5 and a 2 does the trick, with a total of 12. The Grand Magus gains immobilized, again. With 2 of the same status, the Grand Magus suffers -1 health, and is finally removed from the game. The villainous cast gains 3 plot points for removing the enemy star from play. In a desperate attempt to flee, the Goblin Shaman spends its last action to use bad trips. It passes the statistic test with a 6, and summons noxious fungi between itself and the Elf Scout. Both models are pushed 2 inches each away from one another, and must both take a body statistic test. The Shaman, requiring a 6 or above, fails with a 3 and gains the poison status. The Elf Scout, also requiring a 6, fails with a 1, and it too is poisoned. Lastly, the villainous cast pays to remove the stun status from the Goblin Champion, and moves the model into base contact with the Giant Eagle.
With only 4 models left in play, the villainous cast must check to see if they are axed. With no star or co-star left, they automatically fail, and must roll 1d6 and remove that many models. They roll a 4 and are wiped from the playing area, immediately ending the game.
The forces of darkness disperse, but what hidden knowledge and riches did they manage to take with them?
At the end of our game, the heroic cast claimed no objectives, but did manage to banish the Vile Necromancer, worth 3 victory points. The enemy also had no models in play at the end of the game, and so the heroic cast gains an additional 2 victory points, totaling 5 victory points.
The villainous cast claimed all 4 objective tokens, each worth 1 victory point. They also managed to remove both the Grand Magus and the Weathered Ranger, worth 3 and 2 victory points respectively. This takes their total to a whopping 9 victory points, declaring them the victor.
The foe proved too terrible for our heroes. A hasty retreat into the surrounding woodland to their elven brethren spared the Magus and his ranger companion, while the fate of the town is left in the grasp of the necromancer's approaching forces. They say the night is always darkest before the dawn, and a new chapter may spell better fortune for our heroes.
This was just one of the exciting skirmishes awaiting you in 7TV Fantasy. How will you begin your tale?